This episode is brought to you by Neteera. Elevate patient care with Neteera's contactless passive monitoring solutions. The FDA-cleared technology uses precision sensing to monitor critical vital signs and behaviors, all without physical contact, providing near real-time insights and supporting early detection. Now is the time to step into the future of healthcare. Visit thisweekhealth.com/Neteera and transform your patient monitoring capabilities.
The ultimate goal here is for you not to have to change your behavior in order to utilize our technology. Where do you visualize this data? Where do you collect this data? Where does your team spend their time? Is it in Epic? Is it in Cerner? Is it in PCC? That's where we want to deliver it.
Welcome to This Week Health. My name is Bill Russell. I'm a former CIO for a 16 hospital system and creator of This Week Health, where we are dedicated to transforming healthcare one connection at a time. Now, on to our interview. All right, we have an interview in action today, and I'm excited to be joined by Joe. Joe, we were just talking about your title. Tell us about what you're doing with Neteera.
Yeah, so I guess my formal title is VP of Strategy and Finance. I've been with the company for just about 7 years now, a little longer. So I've been really through the journey with them from the ground up. I was part of the initial investment round way back in 2016. So I got to know the C-suite pretty well and ultimately joined them at the very beginning of 2018. We really had this vision of how can we take a different type of technology and leverage it to really impact different markets. And one of the big inspirations in the company was Steve Jobs. And I see you have the picture behind you. There's a picture of him when he was very ill laying in the hospital bed. And so we've come all this way with wireless everything. And I'm sitting here strapped to an EKG and a breathing tube and all these things. And we really haven't come far enough in the healthcare journey. An Israeli technology company, Israeli tech in general, is very good at taking a piece of technology that might not be specific to a market, but adapting it for a different use case. And that was really what drove the vision of using a contactless system for healthcare.
That is what the conversation is going to be about. It's really the patient room of the future. And as we look at this, the patient room of the future, there's almost an interesting debate of what is the patient room of the future? Where is it going to be is the first question people want to ask. Is it still going to be in the acute care hospital or on the campus, or is it going to be in the home? We know more and more care is being provided in senior care centers and whatnot. And the contactless really does open up the opportunity to do a lot more out of the home and in those senior care facilities, I would imagine.
Yeah, for us, I think when we went into this, we thought that we'd start in the home and work backwards. And then we realized that you need to get really clinical buy-in and clinical utility and learn from the people who are using it. So we actually had to go back and start in that clinical setting, which for us today is predominantly skilled nursing, as you mentioned, but more and more in areas of needs within the hospital. So if you think about emergency departments and labor and delivery, or areas where you typically don't have telemetry or ICU data, but that data is valuable, that's where we are starting. And then ultimately, you look at the home as the ultimate extension of where you can give care or where you can have some degree of comfort with the patient status. And to your point, the contactless nature, the scalable nature, the over-the-air updates and the new features that come along really give us a unique ability to deliver that care in whatever setting makes most sense for the patient where they are in their journey.
When you talk about the health system and hospital setting, obviously, I would imagine you get a lot of questions around the clinical viability of contactless. What are the answers to those questions? What's the response?
The response is that if you can't trust it, then you can't use it. So we've had to go through the FDA validation process, and we thought at that point we got FDA approval. We were done. Then each customer says, no, we need to validate it to our standards too, and in our environment, in our use case. Every new customer touch point is both an opportunity, but we have to validate that we do what we say we can do. We're working with one of the largest hospital systems in the Northeast right now in a telemetry unit, and it's validation of the data because their team and their clinicians need to trust the information coming out of it and not just say that the FDA said this is great, so we're going to go with it.
Wow. So a project like this starts with a pilot and then scales some more, I would imagine.
It does. So it starts with a pilot. There's a couple of phases to it. The first phase is let's install it and see what the data says versus the ground truth, which is a typical telemetry system. The next one is what is this data showing us that the telemetry system is not, and how do we interpret it? Because it's not apples to apples. Even a telemetry system, there's dozens of flavors of it, what data is coming out, what metrics are being pulled from it. So We're incredibly accurate in both heart rate and respiration rate. And the ironic part is most clinicians don't use respiratory rate because it's your breathing pattern looks fine. We're going to put a 16 down in your chart. But the reality is that information is probably the most dynamic and the most useful. So the clinicians have to go back to figuring out, okay, how do we use this? How do we change our approach to delivering care based on a whole new set of information that we didn't really know the meaning of prior to it? There's that second phase of the, okay, how do we implement this? And then there's the word of mouth within the organization of, I wonder if they can help us solve this problem. In that case, it could be labor and delivery. Or I wonder if it can help us solve this problem, which we've had adverse outcomes in emergency department waiting rooms. So it's really amazing to see every clinician you talk to has a different axe they need to grind. And one of the things about a flexible, scalable platform is it allows us to solve a lot of those problems with the same system.
Is it one system, one patient? You just said a
Yeah.
waiting room, and I'm picturing a bunch of people sitting around and it's monitoring a bunch of people. I can't imagine that we're doing that yet.
No, so that's down the line. Our system will be hopefully one device for multiple people, but that's not where we are today. In the waiting room environment, these are actually installed either in the waiting room chairs or just behind them. So it's assigned to a chair versus a patient. This way it's agnostic to who's there. If it's Mrs. Jones or Mr. Smith's wife, we want to just know that somebody's stable, and it doesn't really matter because they're not admitted yet. We just want to know what's going on.
That's a fascinating use case
Yeah.
because so much happens in that waiting room in that time. The health systems that are taking you into going at scale and whatnot, are they predominantly within the four walls of the health system, or are they starting to take you outside of the health system as well?
I think we see a lot of commonality in the goal, which is we want to have this across the ecosystem to deal with continuum of care with a consistent data flow from a consistent device. There's different approaches to it. We have a group in the Scottsdale area that's starting in the emergency department, and then they'd like to go into a new facility they're building, and then ultimately into skilled nursing. So they're across the organizational structure. There's some that are saying, hey, you've proven that you do very good work in skilled nursing. We're going to start there so we can work on all the integrations that are important to our organization, figuring out how we're going to use the ability to monitor from a centralized location before we deploy across the hospital system. Or there's people in systems in rural areas that are looking at starting in skilled so they can prove out the use case and then have the home as the next frontier, if you will. So it really depends on what problem they're trying to solve and how they want to go about it.
Let me think about the different problems. And I always think about the economics of it. You're a finance guy as well. The economics of it does play into it. So for a health system, they're solving either a specific problem that they are not able to solve any other way, or they're replacing devices. So the financial model is really replacing existing devices, I would think.
It is. There's also a manpower element to it. There's a what don't we know? There's how do we reduce readmissions within the organization? There's a lot of different pieces. The thing that we found is we typically have to lead with a hard dollar savings because finance people say it will be nice if the soft dollar savings can come with FTE replacements or nurses can do more with less. But the reality is they're so constrained from a resource perspective that anything you can give them in soft dollars isn't so much as a savings as it is a gain in utility. But there are programs in place that can actually offset these costs. They can turn into profit centers. So it allows the organization to see a glide path to, okay, we can take this financial risk now because there's programs in place that could potentially offset the cost and maybe make it profitable. But we see where we want to go, and those are the soft dollar savings that we'll know we'll get to, but we got to really be sure in the beginning that the hard dollar value is there. And then one of the cool things about our system is there's over-the-air updates. So we'll push new features. We recently launched something with a motion index, and down the line, we're talking about blood pressure and atrial fibrillation. And these don't require a hardware change. They're just an over-the-air software update because it's a reinterpretation of the same signal. It's a different algorithm layered on top of it. So what we're trying to do is give them something that has a defined ROI today, but has an incremental one as we go forward.
Yeah, you're almost defining the Tesla car, right? Software changes the world.
Yep. Software-defined medical system.
Yeah. So senior care, there actually is reimbursement for this kind of device, I would assume.
Yeah, there's a couple different programs. There's remote patient monitoring. There's remote therapeutic monitoring. There's a bunch of different things that can go on. We see people Depends on how the organization is set up and how they want to use the technology, but this can be a full enterprise business for a group that wants to specialize in remote patient monitoring billing, or can be an augmented workflow tool if there's a physician group on the ground that wants to just utilize the data differently.
And home care is predominantly readmissions that we're addressing.
Home care it's a little bit like the next step down, which is you're ready to leave, but we're not ready to let you go. So it's that next level of patient care where you may have a visiting nurse that's part of the program, but our tool is going to give a data element to that to give that quantifiable quality feedback loop to the clinicians.
This is really interesting because I talk to CIOs all the time about the patient room of the future, and they'll mention wireless and they'll mention cameras in the room, and so it's all these devices that are going to be around in the room that are going to be monitoring the patient. And this is just the natural next step. Instead of all those things attached to me, I'm going to have something that's monitoring my vitals and whatnot. What vitals are you monitoring at this point, and what's the next step there?
Yeah, so we have respiratory rate, heart rate, the derivatives thereof, meaning we can see heart rate variability, heart rate interval, respiratory rate, respiratory variability, respiratory depth, which is how deep or shallow your breathing is, which is incredibly important contextually, not just the absolute number. We do motion, so we can see things like how restless somebody may be in bed. Have they left bed? We can see some of the behavioral patterns around that. Have they left 3 or 4 times in the middle of the night? For how long have they gone? We're working on blood pressure, like I said, atrial fibrillation. We can see the flutter in the waveform of the heart. There's a lot of different things. Basically, if your body delivers a mechanical signal, we can pick that up. Everybody knows what an electrocardiogram is, right? It's the electrical activity of the heart. What we're measuring is what's called a ballistocardiogram. So it's the mechanical activity of the body. So we're hoping that we can see things like stroke output, stroke volume, cardiac output, things like that. If there's a mechanical element to what your body's producing, we're hoping that we can deliver that in the future.
What does the installation look like? It's interesting when we talk about all these devices and whatnot, and then I talk to the CIOs and they're like, yeah, man, I'm going to have to retrofit all these rooms. I'm going to have to do this. I'm going to have to pull this in, whatever. Is this a significant project to put these things in? Or?
No, as a matter of fact, that customer I was talking about here in the Northeast, we just did the 34 unit installation there in one of their telemetry wings. They kept saying, we know that you told us it's going to be easy, but we actually had no idea how simple it was going to be. We pre-program these devices. They get mounted on the ceiling with a clip that we have that attaches to the drop ceiling. And then the wire goes up and gets plugged in, and it's over Wi-Fi. Future generations will have power over Ethernet. Incredibly simple. Takes our guys a few minutes for every room, and it's completely scalable and flexible. It's remarkably simple.
So all they need is power right now. Power and Wi-Fi.
Power and Wi-Fi. Yeah. Wi-Fi is sometimes more difficult for people to want to give us access to. But other than that, yeah, power and Wi-Fi is all we need.
Is it feeding all the devices into the normal tools that I'm going to see at the nurse station?
So right now our data flows either into their bespoke workflow if they need to use our APIs to pull it in there, or we can push it into an EMR system and have it go into whatever. The ultimate goal here is for you not to have to change your behavior in order to utilize our technology. Where do you visualize this data? Where do you collect this data? Where does your team spend their time? Is it in Epic? Is it in Cerner? Is it in PCC? That's where we want to deliver it. But if you are an organization that's built a business around this technology and you have your own bespoke workflow that you're pulling it in, we have partners that do that too.
Who does this sales start with out of curiosity? Does it start with the chief medical officer? Does it start with a CMIO? Where does it start?
Yeah, I wish I could tell you because that would make our lives a lot easier. But typically it starts with somebody who's got some type of innovation in their title where they're looking at what does the future of patient care look like? What does the future patient room look like? How do we future-proof what we're doing? We tend to have clinical informatics people are very interested in what we're doing. CMIOs, senior folks with a clinical and an innovation tilt are usually our best friends.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Joe, I love the work that you guys are doing. I appreciate the fact that hopefully by the time I'm sitting in that room, I'm not strapped in and wired into.
Or hopefully we can keep you at home.
Yeah, that would be even better. And I do hope that is the future of healthcare, that we can figure out a way to keep more people at home. I think that is the desire. Hey, thanks for your time. Really appreciate it.
Appreciate it, Bill. Thanks.
Thanks for listening to this Interview in Action episode. If you found value in this, share it with a peer. It's a great chance to discuss and in some cases, start a mentoring relationship. One way you can support the show is to subscribe and leave us a rating. If you could do that, would be great. Thanks for listening. That's all for now.